Hey guys, welcome to Hughes History. We have not the Federalist Papers on tap for you, but the Anti-Federalist Papers. These papers, they don't get any notoriety like the Federalist Papers, but they exist. They're out there. So let's look at the arguments that the Anti-Feds had as they argue in essays across the nation against ratifying the U.S. Constitution. Here we go. Giddy up for the learning. Bang, bang. Most of us know the story. Once upon a time, some American colonists got together in 1776 and overthrew the strongest, most powerful nation on earth, Great Britain, in the American Revolution. Now, from 1776 to 1787, the first decade of American history, we were run under a framework of a constitution called the Articles of Confederation. And if you look at the Declaration of Independence, the reasons why we left Great Britain in the first place, you can see why that framework is the way it is. It's a very loose confederation of states. There's an immense fear of centralized power, that power corrupts. Therefore, don't give the central government much power at all. And that's in fact true. There is only a Congress. There's no judicial branch, no executive branch, no power to tax. There's no standing army. It's very hard to pass a law. It's almost impossible to amend the Articles of Confederation, but that's because they believed that a limited government meant more liberty for everybody. And then the story goes that Shays' rebellion and insurrection is going to lead to a fear that this weak central government can't handle itself, that we need a stronger union. And the people that believe that go to the Constitutional Convention in 1787 to write a new constitution. Now, because you needed all 13 states to amend the Articles of Confederation, and Rhode Island was like, no way, Jose, they decided that rather than trying to amend it, they would just write a whole new constitution, and that's what they did. And by September of 1787, they're like, we're done. Let's ratify this sucker. And then both sides go out to persuade Americans either for ratification or against. Now, the for ratification side, you've already heard about that. That's the Federalist Papers. James Madison, John Jay, Alexander Hamilton are going to lead a very centralized effort, a unified effort, to go out and point by point defend the new U.S. Constitution, to argue for ratification. But there's also another side, the Anti-Feds, and they're going to write essays under a very much less unified effort. They're not putting their heads together. They're just throwing spaghetti at the wall, in a sense. A couple names you might know. You might know George Clinton, governor of New York. You might know Patrick Henry. He authored many of the Anti-Fed papers. But then there's a whole cast of characters that you probably don't know, and they're all going to write under pseudonyms like Cato and Brutus and the Federal Farmer. Now, it wasn't until 1965 at the University of Chicago that the Anti-Fed papers were compiled into kind of a group that matched the Federalist Papers, but nevertheless, they're very interesting. They very much sound like the Tea Party advocates today, people that are saying that the federal government's corrupt, that the federal government is taking your liberty away, that we need self-rule. If we're going to have democracy, democracy should be run localized by the people that handle the affairs of their own business. There's an immense fear in the Tea Party and the Anti-Fed Party of centralized power, and a fear that this power corrupts and that the elite, the merchant class, the banker class, the industrial class, they're really invisibly holding the levers of power, and their self-interest is outriding the self-interest of the people. So let's take a look at some of the Anti-Fed papers. How excited are you? And in many cases, just reading the titles are really going to explain where they're coming from. So what are we waiting for? Let's take a look at a few of the Anti-Fed papers. Anti-Fed Paper 1, and I love that it's written by someone who calls themselves a Federalist, but the title says it all. The title is A Dangerous Plan of Benefit Only to the Aristocrat Combination, and what the Federalist argues in this paper is that lawyers and the elite and the banker class, if you give them an inside loop to power, they're only going to grow their power. They're going to grow it tenfold. And what he says is, I'd rather be a free citizen of the small Republic of Massachusetts than an oppressed subject of an American empire. He says of politicians, they are the loaves and fishes for which they hunger. That if you give them power, their self-interest will outride the self-interest of the people of the United States. More government, less liberty, no thank you. Anti-Fed paper number 8, the power to suppress insurrections using troops. The anti-Feds don't like the idea that the big old government's going to have a big old army. They see it through the lens that one day and soon after that the federal government's going to use this standing army, their power to have a standing army, to crush the liberty of its own citizens in the states. They would argue this can be seen through the Whiskey Rebellion, when Washington is going to use federal troops to crush an insurrection by citizens in Pennsylvania. And then some would argue, and I don't like the argument, but that Eisenhower using troops to integrate the schools of Little Rock is a crushing of the liberty of the people of Arkansas. So that's Anti-Fed paper number 8. Watch out for the big old guns of the government. Fed paper number 9 by Montezuma. How cool of a name is that for an anti-Fed? A consolidated government is tyranny. This is really an argument against the Senate and the president as being a protector of the elite class. Remember, the anti-Fed papers are very much laden with anti-elitism, that direct democracy at the local level, people representing themselves, is the best way to protect liberty. That's what a government's supposed to do. So in this paper, they rail a little bit against the Senate. Number one, that they're the ones to protect the president in impeachment trial. Really? The president and the senators? Number two, they're only rotated on a 1/3 basis. So how is there ever going to be real accountability if 2/3 of the Senate is entrenched every election? They're also saying that at the end of the day, the Senate sits above the people, that the House of Representatives, in a sense, is the monkey child of the Senate, which is the elites, the ones that are, in a sense, representing the order of the Union rather than representing the states. So at the end of the day, what these people want is they want a bigger House of Representatives. You know what they want? They want to keep the Articles of Confederation. Anti-Fed paper number 15, Rhode Island, you're right! A whole essay about how Rhode Island was all good and all right about walking away from this shindig. And one of the quotes, a really great quote from Anti-Fed paper number 15 is, "It may be easy to change a free government into an arbitrary one, but that it is very difficult to convert tyranny into freedom." They see this effort, and they're selling it, as a call to tyranny, that the U.S. Constitution will be tyranny. And we need to oppose tyranny, because once you go into tyranny, it's a hard road out. Anti-Fed paper number 17, federal power will ultimately subvert state power. And this is probably the main argument, that they're looking at specific wheels of the Constitution in this essay: the elastic clause, the supremacy clause, the interstate commerce system, the idea that there's judicial supremacy in the Supreme Court over state courts. And they're saying that ultimately this is only going to grow. And this is something the Tea Party might say today, that originally the power in the Constitution was like that big. And then because of the mechanisms in the Constitution and the innate nature of human beings to expand power for their own self-interest, it's like this big now. A great quote from that Anti-Fed paper is, "It is a truth confirmed by the unerring experiences of the ages that every man and every body of men invested with power are ever disposed to increase it." You give somebody a little bit of a cookie, they're going to want a whole box of cookies. Anti-Fed paper number 22, amend the Articles. What are you doing? We already have a Constitution. You can't just arbitrarily walk away from it and go write a new one. That you got to play by the rules. And this is an essay trying to persuade the American people. Let's follow the rules, that the Articles can be amended. We can fix these things without having to abandon our liberty on the foot of the statue of tyranny. The U.S. Constitution, they say, is tyranny. If you remember the battle cry of the American Revolution, it's no taxation without representation. So you can bet your better half that there's a whole bunch of anti-Fed papers that are directly addressing the power of tax that the federal government's going to have, specifically Congress. So anti-Fed papers 32, 33, 34, 35, 36 are all revolving around this idea that, again, if you give the power to tax to the central government, that in a sense you're giving them the power to feed themselves. And then they give the power of someone to feed themselves, they're going to be a big old boy one day. Anti-Fed paper number 37 deals specifically with factions, trying to counterbalance the argument on the other side that the U.S. Constitution is the best framework to contain factions and have a healthy republic. And what they really argue is that, yes, Shays' Rebellion illustrated that a faction could rise up and try to take the rights away from another faction. In this case, Shays' Rebellion, they say that that's the aristocrats. But they also say that most people lie between these two sides. Most of us aren't in debt, and most of us aren't powerful, rich people. So why are we giving the other side, the elites, the power to have their own revolution, to write new rules because there's an instance of another faction trying to take their rights away? That's the argument. Let's not break up the whole party because there was some party spoilers. Anti-Fed paper 51 specifically deals with the check and balance arguments of the U.S. Constitution, really trying to shine some lights through some of the holes, basically saying that if you give the president the power to veto, that even though it's a two-thirds majority to override, let's be kind of common sense here, you're giving the president basically the right to X out democracy. If people want something in the House and the Senate, they're not going to be able to get it because of one guy. And there's also other objections to other checks and balances where they're trying to show that there are some holes in here. There's going to be an opportunity for the federal government to play within those new rules to get what they want, even though there's supposed to be checks and balances to protect liberty. They say that liberty shouldn't be protected by Swiss cheese. Anti-Fed paper 84 is going to be a winner. We have a winner. Give the kid a balloon. This is going to be on the lack of a Bill of Rights. Why, oh why, is there no Bill of Rights? And really, the people that wrote the Constitution, they don't have a really strong argument to stand on. That the idea that we should write into the U.S. Constitution to amend it to have specific protections for liberty, which is so feared to be lost by these anti-Feds, is going to be persuasive, and it is going to force the hand of the Federalist where we're going to get the 10 Bill of Rights. And of course, all of those are down in the description below, as well as the Federalist Papers, but I talk too much. Let's just do one more. Hashtag Anti-Fed paper number 85, concluding remarks. The evils under the articles are exaggerated. The Constitution needs to be greatly revised and amended. It's the final pitch to say, hey, what do you say? This Constitution shouldn't stay. We need to change it. It's just too dangerous. They go through point-by-point arguments that, number one, the general construct of the Constitution is going to lead to tyranny, that eventually the states are going to be subjected to the oppression of the federal government in the name of the Union. Number two, they say that this representation that's held in the legislature, the way that it's constructed, is just not good enough to secure the blessings of liberty. It's not going to do the job. They go through Congress, the power of taxation, how that is too powerful, that it's going to lead to oppression, that the courts are going to be supreme over the states, and as that power expands, because human nature is to expand its own power, it's going to subject the state courts to the wills and the whims of the Union Court, the Supreme Court. The president has too much power. At the end of the day, it's a final pitch that if you love your liberty, that you shouldn't sign on to this U.S. Constitution, that we need to take a stand as the people, consent of the governed, to say, let's stop this bad boy before it becomes the tyranny we all know it's going to be. How about that? So there you go, guys. There's the Anti-Fed papers. There it is as a summary. We hope that you understand a little bit more about it than when you press the button in the beginning of the video. And now I'm going to wish you well. I'm going to say what I always say at the end of every video lecture: where attention goes, energy flows. We'll see you guys next time you press the buttons.